So today we're going to talk about the Valley wetland, farm and ag use. We're going to have a little bit of a community discussion on some visions for the Valley and for the farm there. We'll talk about mountain bald management and then public access. And at the very end, we'll have time for questions as well. So we're really excited to hear from folks today, and we've got a lot of things to cover. So you can go back. No, you're good. So here's a little bit of a snapshot of Guemes Island here. In the yellow, you can see conservation areas. So we've got two large conservation areas here, and a conservation area is a property that the land trust owns. So we own and manage those properties. We've got Guemes Mountain and Valley Conservation Area, and then over here on the left-hand side is the Kelly's Point or Yellow Bluff Conservation Area. In bright pink, we've got conservation easements, and conservation easements are a little different than conservation areas. These are owned by private landowners who have a dedicated interest in protecting portions of that land and have reached out to the trust, and we are vested partners in protecting those portions of land on those landowners' properties. A little different here though, that our conservation areas, so the Guemes Mountain and Valley and Kelly's Point, we have public access on those properties, but conservation easements, that's really up to the landowner for whether or not they would like public access on those properties. And we really work with landowners to try and address their needs and their wants in those decision-making skills. So one, we're really excited to announce too, is that we have a new conservation easement on Guemes Island, this Casperson Point conservation easement here. We're really excited to extend protection out here on Guemes. Another thing I wanted to highlight on this map here is that there are San Juan Preservation Trust preserves and easements as well. We partner a lot with San Juan Preservation Trust, and you can see that there is actually an easement over almost the entirety of the Guemes Mountain and Valley Conservation Area as well. There's also some Washington State protected areas on Guemes too. So quite a bit of protected land on Guemes actually, and it's a good patchwork of different organizations working together to protect these lands. And dogwoods too, they've got a lovely public trail going on there too. That's a great spot. So, all right, I'm gonna pass it on to Regina to talk about the Valley wetland.
Yeah, so we knew that a lot of people have had questions about the wetland and that it's been kind of just a major point of interest for folks on the island. So we wanted to talk about it early on. And I'm going to talk for a few minutes and share some information that we have about it and kind of what we've been learning and working on. And then we'll have a lot of time for questions afterwards too. So if you're curious about something that I say, or you have something else that comes to mind, there will definitely be time to talk about it right after this. So Guemes Valley is a large historic wetland, which was drained for agricultural use sometime after the island was settled by Native people. By looking at this soil map here, it's a little tricky to see, but you can kind of see the shape of the wetland as it's kind of currently existing. And it's actually the soils that the wetland overlays are soils that are created by wetlands. So the wetland is, even though it's gotten more expansive, it's in an area that historically was, actively enough a wetland to create those wetland soils, which was kind of neat when we figured that out. Though historically widespread in almost all valleys, streams, and creeks in North America, beavers were largely eradicated through trapping in the 19th century and have not been present throughout much of Skagit County for the past 100 years. On Guemes or through a lot of the rest of the county. And that allowed us to put roads and carry out agriculture in a lot of areas like Guemes Valley that were formerly wetlands. Today, beaver populations are rebounding, really rebounding throughout our region and across North America. They've now reestablished on Guemes, as I think most people in this room probably know, and most people on the island know. And they're a major contributor to the return of the wetland to that historic extent. That said, the wetland would be present in some form with or without the beavers. Beavers generally expand areas that already store water on the landscape. They're just really good at doing that. Human infrastructure out there, the road, is now intersecting with beavers reclaiming their previous territory, which they're very good at. Techniques that worked with beavers even 20 years ago no longer really work with that exploding beaver population in a lot of areas. For example, trapping beavers was once a really common fix that would solve a problem for a long time when there was a conflict. But if you talk to the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, they now say that trapping and removal is categorized as a short-term solution because populations of beavers will spread back out and repopulate areas if you remove beavers from that part of the landscape. Just the scale of beaver removal is nothing compared to what it once was. So knowing that, many agencies encourage trying other solutions like engineered systems and figuring out ways to live with beavers present on the landscape so we can coexist together. As we're experiencing here on Guemes, beavers can create problems for humans, but they're also really important in the environment. There are many exciting ways that beavers are helping address environmental issues, such as drought or flooding associated with climate change. The recovering wetland is incredible in many ways outside of the presence of beavers in the wetland. It provides wildlife habitat for common and less common species, including shorebirds. The wetland out here and the shorebird habitat in this wetland is of interest to national protection programs for wetlands because there's actually not a lot of habitat out there of this type that can support shorebird populations. It's potentially a recharge site for the Guemes Island aquifer. We really look forward to learning more about the role of the valley wetland in the aquifer recharge from the in progress USGS study. So we're really excited to hear more about what the role of the wetland is for something that's pretty important to people as well. The beaver dams are located on adjacent property to the Land Trust's valley, which the trust holds a conservation easement on. We're happy to receive most of the water that's being held up by the beavers on the Land Trust property. We can adapt our management of the property to accommodate the wetland. The valley's changed pretty drastically in the last several years. Again, as most people who have been out here know. The western field is now disconnected from the eastern field. So in terms of adapting our management planning, that's been something we've been grappling with. We're exploring restoration options for that western field now, knowing that we can't really get to it for agriculture as easily as we used to be able to. So that's something we are just starting to explore and talk with partners about, and we're learning a lot. So I don't have any solid plans for that, but it's something we're enthusiastically looking into. While we develop that longer term plan, we're working with the Natural Resource Conservation Service to improve shorebird habitat along that western edge of the wetland. So through this whole area, it's a priority area for shorebird habitat, that kind of short grass and forb dominated environment. And so they're working with us to set up management strategies that'll benefit shorebirds. We're pretty excited about that too. We think it's cool. So we're excited about the many benefits and opportunities that the wetland provides. That said, we know the expanding wetland is exacerbating challenges for the county road running across it and is causing a headache and concern for a lot of folks. Eden's Road was not constructed for the current level of use. The road was built on the soft soils of a historic wetland, so it's sinking. South Shore Road is on an eroding bank. We all understand that there needs to be a sustainable long-term solution to provide access for community members to the east side of the island. So these roads are important. Sure. Maybe
I just wanted to know if the blue line is Coyote Creek and if it
Oh.
flows to the south.
Yes, yeah, it does. And this is through this parcel, it's a pretty awkward mapping with the jag in it. So unfortunately, it's a really complicated situation to resolve. If there was an easy solution, it would already be in place. That's how you know that it's complicated. I'm happy to answer a question or.
Yeah, I was just curious approximately where the beaver dams are in this area. Are they marked on this map?
They're not marked on this map, but they're to the south of the land trust property down in this area. Yeah, I mean, the wetland is outlined. So the lower extent of the wetland shows you the approximate location of where water is stopping. We often hear get rid of the beavers as the sure fix to a problem. We've been told by many experts that beavers will return even to Guemes Island within a few months or a year if they're trapped and removed from the site. Most jurisdictions in our area, we've done a lot of research. We've been dealing with a lot of beavers lately, so we've talked to a lot of really smart people about this. And most places have given up trapping and killing as it just doesn't work. Relocation of beavers, which sounds more humane, is actually not allowed in much of Western Washington, making it more difficult than it appears to carry out. There's limited programs out there focused on relocating beavers, and they're pretty overwhelmed right now, as you might imagine. And so there's no program that's actively doing relocation in Skagit County. We want to work with the county and the community to identify and, to the degree possible, support implementation of a sustainable solution that's beneficial for people and wildlife and protects the island aquifer. The county knows that we're very interested in supporting their efforts to identify a long-term sustainable solution. We've met with them several times to look at the wetland and beaver dams on the ground and look at maps together and talk about, what the landscape is like and other ideas that they've had. And so we're excited to continue those conversations and meetings. To help address the road issues for now, we're excited to share that Ducks Unlimited, which is another group that does conservation throughout the United States and has partnered with us on several properties, has collaborated with us and the Samish tribe to request some funding to install a pond leveler out here. So a pond leveler, sometimes people know it as a beaver deceiver. But a pond leveler is an engineered system that would allow a limited amount of water to drain from the wetland in a pipe that runs through the beaver dam. And that would allow the wetland to remain in place, but at a level that won't lead to as many road maintenance issues. So we're pretty excited to have some funding lined up to look at that, and some people who are really excited to partner with us to try and explore, a solution that could help keep the road functional for a bit longer in its current location, while the county works on a real long-term solution for the road. If you're excited about the idea of the pond leveler, keep your eyes peeled for more information. We'll share it when we have it. The proposal actually we heard it just went in yesterday officially. So we don't 100% have the funding guaranteed, but it was not a competitive process. So we're pretty sure that we're getting the funding. And we might be reaching out to organize ways for people to learn a little more about the system or to come out and help us install the pond leveler if you're curious. So we're still developing that plan, but we're excited to keep talking to everyone and share what we learn. And that's kind of what I prepared to just talk about. And so now, if there are more questions, I'm very happy to answer them, or if people have comments.
Where on the property is the Dutch gauge there?
Is the Dutch gauge? The depth gauge.
Yeah, so you can kind of see this line coming out here. It's right at the end. So that used to go all the way across the wetland there, but it's just right there where there's an old fence.
Oh, okay.
So we put a depth gauge there.
Yeah. And Hannah will talk more about access, but I'll just point out that you're welcome to walk down that road if you're curious, and you can look at the depth gauge.
Prior to the original wetlands being drained, historically, in that natural environment, would that water have held freshwater fish? And is freshwater fish beneficial to the overall ecosystem?
Yeah, I think I can't say that we have like for sure knowledge one way or the other. We know that the creek has been changed quite a bit. You know, if you're driving down South Shore Road and you look over the edge there, you can see that there's a perched culvert. So fish haven't been there for quite some time. And I can't say that we have a for sure record that there were fish in the system before, but there's no obvious reason that there wouldn't have been fish in the system when it was actually connected and passable. So yeah, that we might be able to find that out actually if we talk to some folks with the Sandwich Department of Natural Resources or members who live on the island. They might know. We've learned some other interesting things through the conversations. So, and again, Hannah might mention some of that in a little bit too. Yeah, but we would, yeah, I think this is just, I know that looking at ways to improve kind of the conservation values of the wetland and the creek as it goes down is something that we're really interested in. And I don't want to speak for other landowners, but I think that there's wider interest as well. Yeah. Yeah.
So the beaver deceiver would be a way to keep it in wetland, or is that a way to drain it so it would be agriculture?
It's a great question. So it's kind of both, because it's a pond leveler or beaver deceiver is a way to try and mitigate issues that are being caused by a higher water level. So the goal is that you're trying to reduce the water level to kind of an acceptable level where it won't be creating quite the same infrastructure issues. And out here, so they're really widely used in a lot of areas to try and address these issues. At some places use them long-term to kind of manage wetland levels. Our hope is that we can eventually look at a solution that would allow the wetland to be at the level that it would naturally like to be at with beaver's help. But I think that there's a lot of considerations here. And so the beaver deceiver and pond leveler are just trying to lower the wetland enough that the wetland can stay in place. We're worried that at some point a proposed solution could be to entirely get rid of the wetland. And we wouldn't really like that solution just because it would remove so many of the great conservation values that the wetland provides. So this is hoping to solve the issue in a way, and it'll reduce the area, but we're hoping that that means that it allows more of the values to stay in place and continue into the future. We did talk a little bit about that with the county. That goes beyond kind of what the land trust can really kind of help facilitate easily, where we let the county know that if that's a pathway that they're looking at, we'd like to help them in whatever way we can. But it gets complicated. Anytime I'm sure the county is looking at trying to reroute over onto other folks' private property, it gets really complicated. So there's a couple of ideas, and that's something we're interested in exploring with them more. And they do have it on their radar. I think it just feels very complicated to them right now.
I was just wondering if you decided on for that home leveler, target height, and how.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that we haven't decided yet. Really, that's something we need to work with the county on, because they can let us know what level they could actually maintain the road at to a standard where they feel like it'll remain safe in the, at least until this longer term solution can be figured out. And so That's going to involve some more detailed surveys of the landscape, which Ducks Unlimited can help with. So part of the funding they're requesting would allow them to go out and get a better idea of elevations across the valley so that they'd be able to work with engineers at the county to determine that acceptable wetland level. Yeah, so we don't have it yet, but we're hoping to figure it out after a conversation with the county.
When I was a girl, a long time ago, Eden's Road did flood. And that wetland was the wrenches mountains. You know, it was pasture. And so I don't know about building the road in the wrong place in the first place, but I guess I'm just making the observation that it has been agriculture before. And when did the beavers start raising? Do you know that?
I mean, this might be something, if other folks know, feel free to chime in. But I think the first reports I heard were around 2014, 2015, sometime around then. And that's just my memory, so somebody might know. But we'd also observed the wetland, like the area was not holding a ton of water, but it was, if you look at aerial imagery over the years, you can see still the shape of the wetland. It's still, as much water was not held up there for sure, but it was still functionally serving a purpose of holding some water on the landscape. It wasn't as easily observed. And I think that there's a couple factors that probably went into the wetland starting to come back. The beavers obviously have a major role because they're just so good at what they do that they can back up water more efficiently than anything else. But a lot of, on other properties that we have, we also noticed that over time, those older like agricultural drainage systems that were put in the 19th century that allowed people to go in and farm these areas, over time they start failing. And so we're seeing other areas too that used to be farmed where the drainage systems are no longer functioning. And so part of it is probably that, that drainage system failure as well.
This had been ditched and tiled too, so there was drainage tiles in there, and those break down over time, especially if they're not continually managed for those drainage tiles, and then the seeping in different spots and draining in different ways. And so yes, the beavers did a big majority of that, but also that facilitated drainage wasn't kept up to continue the drainage down. I agree.
And we're not farmers, so this is just what we understand from people explaining it to us. So we're probably not explaining it at the highest level, but that's our level.
Yeah, I went on one of the kind of the scoping missions with Ducks Unlimited, and that was one thing. There was a couple spots where we found drainage tiles, but they were definitely broken. And so I'm sure that's all up and down where that egg was facilitated to drain.
Yes.
So the county had done a study paid for it, and they came to report came to that if the beavers went to town and built the dam up, what the maximum water level would be for the topography. When the county, fixed the road this summer, the road was in terrible shape, and they were more resurfacing the road, but they also raised it quite a bit. Do we know yet how far they raised it and what that is in relation to kind of accident?
That's a great question. I don't know, and I'm not sure. I feel like they should know what level, but a lot of times we've found that those measurements are kind of relative to the, they're taking measurements relative to the immediately surrounding landscape, not necessarily like to the elevation above sea level, which is what the report focused on. So I don't know that, at least with, they haven't shared a number with us that they raised it to yet. They might know, but they might not, just because often they're doing it kind of referencing locally. but that would be something that we'd work with the county and look at in partnership with folks, and Ducks Unlimited would refer to that when they're trying to determine that level that they'd be trying to maintain the wetland at. Yeah.
Do you know anything more about how that's determined, if that's going to be a recharge site, and is there any way to know anything historically about?
They did do a lot of sampling, going around to folks' wells. And so it's very interesting. I don't know exactly for us.
Yeah, I can't say that we know. We're really excited to find out, probably when everyone else finds out when the study comes out. But this is pretty new for us as well. We're all learning too. And so, yeah, it's something.
When we did the survey before, and also now you're tracked how big the aquifer wetland was, and is there so I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be hopeful.
Yeah, I think that I don't even know the kinds of things they can measure in wells to determine it. So I trust the hydrogeologists, but yeah, I think we're really interested. And I will say, you know, in conversations with the county, when we talked to them and flagged that study was happening out here as well, the county was interested in learning about that, and the staff who we were talking to about options were interested in learning more, and you know, said that the aquifer is obviously like something that's important to know about in determining what those long-term solutions are. So we were excited to hear that in the meeting that we had and talked about it.
I was just gonna ask if there's a reference to how much is held up there now.
That's another great question. I think my rough estimate would be that the outlined area there is probably close to 40 acres.
Mhm.
Yeah, the field, I'm basing that this field here is about 25 acres. So, yeah, but I mean, it's hard to know like the actual amount of water. It's pretty deep in the center of the valley when it's full. You know, I can say when I was out there on a kayak, and this was a couple of years ago, was testing the depth with an oar. It didn't hit the bottom in the middle.
Is it okay if people take human powered vessels out? It's like, sounds like you guys. I will. Is that?
Yeah, I think Hannah will talk a little more about access, but like a quick answer is we don't have a problem with, it's fine for people to go and look at the wetland. And I think we'll talk a little bit about just what we ask people to do if they're visiting natural areas like that.
And also, it's not on our property, it's private property.
Yeah.
And those boundaries within the water are not very well marked.
Sure, yeah.
So
No, I was just saying.
I would say definitely no like electric or gas powered or anything. Human powered for sure. And then leaving no trace practices. So taking your boat back with you.
One thing with living on trace, if you work with Ducks Unlimited to the habitat, are you opening up a hunting weekend to go out and shoot them up there?
That's a good question. We are not. They actually, Ducks Unlimited has worked with us on a lot of properties where we don't allow hunting. Because their goal is just to increase habitat in major corridors. And I think they see that as being beneficial, whether or not there's access. Yeah.
You don't need bulletproof vests to go hiking.
No bulletproof vests needed to go out there. Yeah. Yeah. No, they've been a great partner for learning more about the wetland too. When we first got the property, they worked with us to get some funding to do the very first survey of the wetland and help us learn a little bit more, and produced a very basic initial elevation map that we've all looked at a lot when we're thinking about the wetland, and have stayed in touch. And I know a lot of partners might have been a little wary of getting involved and helping try to figure out a complicated, sticky issue like this, but they jumped right in and said, oh, it sounds like we could help get funding for this. So we're really appreciative right now of their willingness to help. And I think, like I said, this is all still evolving. We're excited to keep sharing information and keep hearing from folks. And if there are things that people observe or think of, feel free to send them our way. We appreciate hearing from people, especially since we all live on the mainland. And so we're not out here all the time. So updates from people who are on the island much more really help us track what's happening. Yeah.
If you go back to the previous slide real quick, past through here. So these are some cool shorebirds.
Oh,
Yeah.
we're pretty excited. And I'll just, since I think we have a couple minutes, this line here along the fence, we're pretty excited. We worked with the Natural Resource Conservation Service to put in the cattle fencing. And along the cattle fencing, we've learned a lot. Actually, the boundary between the area that Glenn Veal was using for his cattle operation and the wetland was really great shorebird habitat, in part because the grass was kept so short. So we were troubleshooting with the folks at NRCS to see how we could try and address some of the water quality impacts that we didn't want to have on the wetland, like, you know, cattle waste ending up in the wetland. And so the fence went in, but we wanted to figure out how to preserve that short stubble for shorebirds. So they're working with us and supporting us, coming out much more regularly to mow that area. And just to toss this out, we actually considered trying to do like flash grazing in these areas, which is where you have cattle or other ungulates that, you know, herbivores that folks have come out and graze heavily for a very short period of time to help manage the vegetation. So if anyone on island who has livestock wants to talk to us, we'd love to talk to you, because we could definitely work with you on improving the shorebird habitat out here. But in the interim, we're mowing.
As you can see, the shorebirds do appreciate the cattle waste, and they put their nests right in it.
I don't recognize that.
I want to say it's a plover, but I am not the bird expert here. Maybe there's another bird expert in the room. So we talked a lot about the wetland here. And as you can see that there are kind of two agricultural fields going on. We've got the west agricultural field and the east agricultural field here. The west, you know, was previously used by Glenn Veal and his cattle, and we've really appreciated that relationship, especially for that shorebird habitat. It's unfortunate, but he's decided to close down his cattle operation over the last year. And you can see too that the access there has become really difficult. And so we are working on some strategies of restoration actions out there. And like Regina mentioned, we're doing some mowing and stuff to keep that grass shorter and keep providing that habitat for the shorebirds there. So we can move on. We're going to talk about the east side here, though. We're very excited about this pasture here. We've got 25 acres of pasture land. We've got that beautiful, iconic red barn out there, and the trust received an anonymous gift to stabilize the historic barn so that it'll remain in the valley and continue to be that icon. Before beginning, an engineer did a structural assessment and discussed zoning and building codes with the experts. And it was determined that it would be enormously expensive to bring the barn up to standards for public use. So we sought funds to repair it so that it was structurally able to stand without being tied to a tree, and is now safe for agricultural and stewardship use. So this site is really exciting because we've got this nice 25-acre pasture area. We've got a barn that has power, and there's also water on site through a well, and it was previously hayed, currently mowed by our contractor here. But for future use, we're really seeking passionate farmers out here. And we really want to reach out to you all to get your ideas and visions for this pasture area. There's a lot of great assets here, and we're looking for folks. It doesn't necessarily have to be hayed. There's other options for this land, but we would really like to hear all of your thoughts. And so this, I don't remember if I have another slide. Yes, okay. So not too different, but we want to hear from you all. So this iconic barn, this iconic valley, this combination of wetlands and 25-acre pasture area. What do you all envision? What are you excited about this valley area? And then also, do you know of any resources or people that we should connect with to get folks out here?
I'm just curious, is this like to lease the land, or how would that work structurally? You lease it to a farmer for events?
Yeah.
To use the land?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We do have other farmlands throughout Skagit County, and the majority of those are leased for hay. And we work with the farmer based off of, the quality of the land or the price of hay fluctuating every year. And so we really do try to work with our farmers to make sure that, what's happening out on the land and what, they are getting out of it is good. And so this could be hayed. It was previously hayed, but it could also be something totally outside of our scope right now of all sorts of other things. I'm not a farmer, so it's really hard to guess.
But can it be cows? Because you were saying that contaminates wetland.
So I think that there's ways that we could work with farmers if someone wanted to have livestock out here. Just like we did on the West Valley there. I keep wanting to call this the West Valley, so if I do that, I'm sorry. Along the West Valley there, we did install that fencing there, and that does help keep the cows out of the wetland. So I think that if someone approached us and wanted to do livestock out there, I think that would definitely be a conversation we could have. Yes.
Yeah, this summer when I was out there mowing, I had a lot of time to sit and look and green, a lot of hours on that tractor to get that mowed. And, just a vision popped into my head was looking at like the barn as an educational center. And a portion of it, however many acres, to facilitate that. And also like a community garden area, the towns, they got the, little pea patches and stuff. And we sell X number of square feet. And that was just, for a section of it, that's kind of what a little dream that I had.
I think our development director would absolutely love a community garden. And it's something too that that would be really cool to host. It's just making sure that we've got 3 stewardship staff for the entire county. And so making sure that whoever is kind of helping us facilitate that community garden is helping facilitate that. But I think that would be something that would be really exciting. In response to the barn, it's kept to agriculture and stewardship standards, and we can do events outside of the barn, but the public access inside the barn, it's not kept up to that standard, and it would just be a ton of money to do that.
How many tons of money?
How many tons of money?
And about 1 million, 114 million to get to a standard that we could have. The public road is hard.
Yeah.
But to do public events, it's over. $1 million.
Yeah.
And I think that was an estimate from 5 or 6 years ago.
So it could be a little bit more now. I've got a question right here, and then I'll come back to you.
The teaching farm, the teaching and learning farm. That's
I think the other tricky part too is housing. That's a lot of kind of what we've heard back too, is that the housing factor, if someone doesn't live on island, going back and forth is tricky. And so, finding farmers on island or folks that already live on island is the most feasible, I would say.
I think there's, maybe just to add to this, I think we're hearing a couple of things. We're hearing like good, big, long-term ideas to think about, to look forward to. And we're also thinking of what to do in the next few years. But I think that some of these things could be a possibility. It might just be farther out, but it's still good to know and something we can.
And this is totally for idea sharing. We are not going to solve this problem in this room right now. And so we appreciate all ideas and thoughts, and so that we can kind of go on those leads. So,
Well, I feel really strongly that, I mean, my friends and I have talked for a long time about all the things we'd love to have farm turned into, and I realize that it's not. Somehow, the idea of the gathering place or whatever it is, I picture these. And I honestly don't think it's impossible to raising money over this time, making it at least presentable or okay for a public event to do, and as you say, education. I'm pretty big.
for sure.
One of the, I don't think it's on the Centennial Railroad. They ready for Center Park. They have the storage boats around that outside the bar, and the next one, use area around that outside the bar. So, empties, whatever. It's right on the trail, right? It's right on the people park there, but, and then, this is lumber, so they ran into the same. But, when we did all the pruning, what we did, the county did say yes. For special events, we know it's but around the outside, that's okay.
And especially if we did have a farmer to be able to utilize that space, that would be great for, holding agricultural equipment or, whatever the farmer decides to do out there. So, yeah.
We came in a couple minutes late, so all of us, we missed it, but there was, I think, talk at one point about a trail from the road down and maybe winding in here, maybe a kind of education trail. And the other part of education is what led mind, besides agriculture, is more general nature education and wetland education. It could be maybe with a kiosk until the farm is ready. Is there still talk about a trail coming down that would?
We have talked about the trail, and we've definitely scoped it out, Ian, back here, and we're kind of waiting to see what happens with the road situation. And I think that right where it pops out is kind of along that blind corner a little bit too. Otherwise, if you went farther west towards the Edens Road along the wetland area, like the trail gets wet. And so either you're close to that blind corner or you're in a wet trail. So I think we're kind of just waiting to see what happens with Edens Road to determine whether or not that that valley trail through the forest there. That's what you're talking about, right?
Well, that's what I heard about. And it seemed to me like you could also maybe have access from the main side here, in the trail with a loop, rather if you can't get up in that area where the road is above.
Right.
Might be some of those alternatives.
Yeah, and we'll at the end, I'm going to talk a lot about public access. So we've got some exciting things about that too. Yeah.
When Ian and I scouted that trail.
Yeah.
And carved it all out, just one of the ideas that got into my head was that we have an aging population here. That hill's getting pretty steep for a lot of us. That trail would be a way for people to have less access to the mountaintop to take in that environment.
Yeah.
To me, I thought that would
Yeah, I think, I mean, that trail proposal,
Instead of worrying about.
We just have a certain.
yeah, no, thanks. Folks falling asleep out there. Oh, yeah, sorry.
So mix of thoughts.
Yeah.
I love the idea of the local trail. For all uses. I also love the idea of this agricultural rewarding. I think the thing is, and use of the barn for public events. The reason I'm a little hesitant there is I'm struggling with the issue. I mean, we are talking about the roads and the line corners. Don't like the idea of turning with more traffic, more cars on various. And what's coming to mind, since we're just brainstorming here,
Yeah.
is we need Mark and land trust and whoever else put together for it and hire, provide employment on the island or something, shuttle bus to get people around the places and something. I'm just trying to minimize that traffic thing. It's already the mountain trail before.
Mhm.
So those are not well formed thoughts. Those are not things, I think for those.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, yeah. I appreciate that.
I'm just curious, looking at this as agricultural land and how much sun there is.
Mhm.
Yes, it's quite a bit of water. This need may be already met by the Washington Plant Materials Center or industries. Could this be a potential site as a native plant industry to industrialization work here on the island, but also on other trusts?
Or partners.
Yeah, okay, that's a good, yeah.
I think that's a great idea
Yeah.
to think about. I mean, we've just started trying to figure out how to produce some like willow stakes for our own properties too.
What was it? Willow sticks?
Willow stakes, live stakes for plantings. They're really nice because you can just cut a piece of the willow off essentially, stick it in the ground and it'll keep growing and be a new plant. So it's really nice for restoration projects. Yeah, in a wetland, it really takes off. And we've looked at that, and I will say, actually, we've talked to a couple of people who have expressed some interest in using the parts of this property for different projects, and one of them is someone who works at the Plant Materials Center. So, and they had a similar idea, but they do not live on the island or kind of logistics of the island as well. So we're curious to keep talking to them. And I think that could be a really neat pathway.
Very constrained in terms of exporting.
Yeah.
Native plants. Just because raising virtue right now, it's like this point at which like, where do I put?
Yeah.
So with the, just the short term plan.
Yeah.
Have somebody. Farm and they lease the entire 25 acre. What you guys do with access to. Then is that like part of the agreement that you kind of have all outline on public access? You have all that.
Right, that's a great question. I think it kind of depends on the farmer. Obviously, it would be something that if the farmer was comfortable with folks still coming out or continuing to be hay, there's tremendous amount of time where agriculture, especially farm equipment, is not actively out there. So I think that there's definitely good partnerships with that. And while there's active farm equipment out, we would probably have, signage or advising folks like, hey, if farm equipment is running, please stay out of the way of those things. And so, yeah.
But I think our hope would be, and like our planning for it would be that there would be some form of access to the valley, no matter what was happening.
Yeah.
That's something we would build in to an agreement.
Yeah. Is there any more questions here? So I think just to recap, we've heard a lot about community use and potential community education. Talking to Viva Farms or maybe Fourth Corner or the Plant Materials Center, and then potentials for using this property as a kind of a garden for future restoration plans as well. Yeah.
I'm just,
About the trails around the outside of it, along this edge of the wetland there, plant blueberries and have a blueberry trail.
That would be nice.
Eat as much as you can.
Until you turn blue.
I had a thought, or at least maybe a request, if at some point in the future, somebody leases that land and whatever operation they have going there.
Yeah.
You know, public access is not conducive to it. Carving out kind of that eastern lobe there where the barn is and making, you know, a rectangle there that is not part of the leased land, that's, you know, public access.
Yeah. I think overall, we would give preference to a farmer that is good with public access. You know, this area out here is obviously super valued by the community and visitors. And so we would want to make sure that that is still a value. So you
yeah, I was just curious because community gardens have come up a couple times in our individual conversations too. And so this is not to put anybody on the spot, but I'm just kind of curious, in this group of people, how many folks would be interested in like a small plot of land at a community garden? Okay.
One question we had is the soil, where the soil would be compared to now? Which ones down here compared to where people have? Or like, is there an attraction to community gardens because it's better soils?
We know, again, not being farmers, our understanding is that the soils on this side of the valley are pretty well suited for row crops and other, I mean, you know, folks who have been out here for a long time have seen that before it was pasture, it was different row crops that were being grown in those areas. So that's our understanding of the soils here from people who know more. The farm specialist of the conservation district was talking to us about it. That's great to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just curious where you put in with your money. I mean, it's so I need a dog. I think. So it's so foggy down there. It's a period. I can got it in the water
We put in at the end of that road.
So this will
Okay.
We were going out this, we were actually going out specifically to do a plant survey of the valley. So we were trying to see like how much diversity of native species were present down there and what invasives we were spotting. So we were trying to get in kind of in peak plant growing
I
times.
tried walking out there almost all the way on that road and it's pretty.
It's mucky now.
It was mucky. Yeah. Yeah, we definitely, we just had smaller kayaks and kind of used the oars to push ourselves out. Yeah.
To put that the measuring stick out there, I was in boots, but I was still standing on the old fencing, shimmying my way out there. I should have had waders on, so it does get deep pretty quick, and it's that like sticky mud too that likes to take your boot with you.
Yeah.
So.
I'm just curious, talking about the wetland and it's mucky and it can get warm in the summer. What's the mosquitoes?
That's a good question. I haven't been out there too much in the dead of summer to know what the mosquito situation is, I guess.
Well, there's a lot of problems.
Yes.
A lot. If you go walking in the fall, they're all over the road.
Oh, I have another, that inspires another question that since people are gathered, I'll just ask you all. Do folks know if there are bullfrogs on Guemes Island?
These are the little green.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert, but I'm pretty sure it was a bullfrog when I driving up and down the hill. There was just a big one in the middle of the road, so I stopped and got out.
They make like a horrific sound too, especially like when they're trying to find a mate. Yeah, they're a good size too. So we're right about at a point right now where we can kind of get up and take a break for a second. If folks want to grab another cookie or a drink or use the restroom, maybe think of a little bit more ideas for this valley area. But we're really intrigued by what folks have come up with so far. Okay, so on to our next topic, the mountain bald. So we are very excited. I guess just to give a preface of where we're at here, the Guemes Mountain Trail coming up all the way to the top there, and that beautiful view of the valley and the surrounding islands and the channels. At the very top, we've got that really nice Camas bald up there. So through monitoring and ecological integrity assessments done by volunteers in partnership with the Samish Indian Nation, the trust have developed a better understanding of what plants are on the Guemes Mountain Bald here. This has helped to inform us for management strategies to improve the bald habitat and hopefully increase the native biodiversity. So we're actively managing the bald in the next couple of years. We've are working on receiving some grant funding to be able to help push back encroaching shrubs such as ocean spray, and there's a couple different grass species up there too, and removing some invasive species too. There's a Volpia grass up there, and to extend that, we are going to be replanting some of these native plants and bulbs as well. So up here on the bald in the next couple of years, we're taking a very active approach. So with that said, you're gonna see some different management up there, as well as maybe some signage that says, hey, this is an active restoration area, you know, please keep off of these certain sections. So you'll be seeing some of that time, and then keeping an eye out too for volunteer opportunities during this restoration. So we have a wealth of stewards out here, but we also like to host volunteer work party events. And this is one of these projects that we're really excited about. And to do that restoration up at the bald here is a little bit new for us. And so we're excited to get the community involved in partnering with the Samish Indian Nation for this. So keep an eye out for that.
Could you just talk a little bit more about the Samish Indian Nation and what, I mean, there's these entities that are in the county and the San Juan Preservation Trust and all the other ones, and then I just keep hearing the Samish Indian Nation that they're so involved in so many different projects and supporting them.
Yeah. Maybe you can give a little bit more of the history there.
Yeah. So I think we mentioned this is part of the territory of the Samish Indian Nation. And so we've worked with them on several projects because this is a really important area for the Samish. And we started out here, I think the first management project we started with them on was this fall, because another important area for the Samish is Cypress Island. And I'm sure if you look over at the up at the forest, you can see some balds up there as well, or if you've explored the island, you may have seen them. And so several years ago, some of the staff with the Department of Natural Resources at the Samish started doing bald assessments to determine kind of the health of the different balds on Cypress Island and doing active restoration work. So they started doing that. We heard about it right about when we were trying to figure out how to manage the bald, which was at that time very new to us, and reached out to ask them for advice, and they responded really enthusiastically, came out, helped us do those integrity assessments on the ground, made time to come out several years in a row to help us out. I learned a lot from them, and they've just really been a great partner in helping us learn from their experiences in understanding and improving the balds on Cypress Island. And so they first got involved in that way. And one thing, Hannah was talking about the funding that we applied for. We're really excited because one part of that funding is intended to help us develop a more in-depth management plan for the bald and for doing bald restoration. And we'll also be able to contract and work with the Samish tribe to basically to work with them and make sure that when we're developing a plan, we're incorporating that tribal knowledge into our management planning process. So they've just been helping us because they're wonderful for the last several years. So we're really excited that the grant is actually recognizing that value and letting us try to support some of their staff time out here too. And they're also involved in the, I mentioned the Ducks Unlimited Pond Leveler grant application that went in. The Samish tribe signed on as a partner for that. The group providing funding for that wanted to prioritize projects that had tribal support. And so when Ducks Unlimited actually reached out to the Samish tribe first and asked them where they'd like to work, and they reached out to us and said, what projects do you have that are in kind of our area? And so we talked a little bit about that, and they're really enthusiastic about getting more involved with the wetland management as well. And so I think we're hoping that that restoration collaboration that started at the Bald can continue down into helping us improve the restoration project we're looking at in the West Pasture as well. Was it count? Sorry.
Was it counting birds?
Counting birds. Yes, they are helping with that a bit as part of that grant application for the wetland. And I think that's something they're really excited about and I'm pretty excited about. Like, we're plant people generally. The staff who's the lead at the Samish tribe for Department of Natural Resources is a bird person. So we like to bring him out to help us get our bird lists up to par.
Yeah. As an extent, oh yeah.
I never heard it called a ball before. Lisa, is that, sounds like a technical term. Is that a naturally occurring thing? Perspective of soil thickness of rock.
Yeah, exactly.
I just never heard it. It's like a beginning ball.
Yes.
And maybe just to add to that, there are kind of bulbs that occur because of naturally limiting conditions where the soils are really thin and there's a rocky substrate, and so it can't support larger plants growing. There's also like a large history of bulbs that were maintained by groups like the Spanish Indian Nation and other native peoples who were in areas that where the ecosystems could be managed in this way. So it's not always just a natural limit. Sometimes there's a long history of human stewardship. Yeah.
So with that funding too, it will expand from the Bald and down the mountain trail in the forest, as well as we develop a forest management plan for the rest of the property, essentially. So keep an eye out for volunteer opportunities. So lastly, I want to give you an update about public access. So we've expanded available parking, public parking, to include additional overflow parking for Guemes Mountain and Valley areas. The first one is at the old house site. So kind of that upper triangle or the middle triangle there on the map. So this spot includes 2 parking spaces. You can see the white car parked right there on that picture on the left. So there's enough room for about 2 cars there. We are looking at parking at that old house site and extending that. It is definitely in the works to be developed, but we're working with the county to try and figure out how many spaces. It's a balance of, we need some additional overflow parking, but we also don't want a Costco parking lot. So working with the community and their needs, but then also making sure that folks are not parking along that road there to make that a hazardous section. The second is near the gate down to the Valley Barn here. There's kind of a Y that goes down to the valley there, that's enough room for about 3 vehicles, as long as, agricultural tractor equipment can still make it through and in and out of that gate. So preferably staying on kind of the northern section of that Y there. 2 is at Kelly's Point. That spot provides up to about 7 vehicles there in that kind of looped trail access there. So the Guemes Mountain Trail and Kelly's Point access is maintained following kind of the Washington Trails Association and U.S. Forest Service guidelines to decrease erosion and provide accessible trails year round. So this includes, keeping the trail clear of duff and debris, and making sure that the tread is not going to be too slick. So you want to move water off of that trail so that it doesn't create these erosions and low spots there. Let's see. So you may have also noticed some beautiful benches on the Guemes Mountain Trail and the old home site. And these provide great views along the trail, pit stops, but then also that house site provides a really nice view of the wetland valley, especially if you're scoping out for birds. You may have noticed if you walk down towards the valley, you're level with the wetlands, so you can't really see a lot of that nice wetland area. You might be scaring off some of the birds, but that bench up there is a great spot for bird viewing. Really nice lunch spot as well. And then also there are some benches out at Kelly's Point. So this lower photo here was a donated bench. All of this work, all of the trail maintenance, all of these benches and the access points, I'm just one person, but I am truly, truly grateful for all of the volunteers that we have out here on Guemes Island who help manage and maintain these properties. I'm not out here all the time. I wish that I was, but these folks have definitely, provided that access, have maintained the access, and have provided those benches. And so I just want to, there's a lot of folks out here that have, touched this land in some way, but if you could raise your hand if you are a land steward at one of these properties here. So these land stewards are the ones that are out here all the time in all sorts of different inclement weather. They are the ones putting in a lot of this work. They are our eyes and ears on the ground. They're the ones that are the squeaky wheel coming back to me saying, this needs to get done. And so I really, really appreciate all of the time and effort that folks have had out here. Now, if you're not a land steward, but you've still volunteered with the land trust or been out here on one of these properties, can you raise your hand too? Yeah. So again, these properties wouldn't exist without all of the community support and effort that everyone puts into it. And I, again, just want to thank you all for all of your help and support. So in this kind of last remaining 15 minutes or so, if folks have questions, thoughts, if you want to give another round of applause for all of our volunteers. Yeah.
I found your presentation about the valley and you very interesting. I think we would all agree that we need a working road across Guemes there in the low spot. But given that, you would mention hydrogeologists as your subject matter experts for aquifer recharge. Now, in their opinion, is assuming that the road stays open for emergency response, is there a net benefit to the beaver ponds retaining that water rather than just have it run out to the channel to recharge the aquifer?
So your question is, from the experts that we've been in contact with, is there a benefit for the wetland level to recharge that aquifer versus just running out of Cayuse Creek down to the channel? Is that right? That's a good question. And I don't think we have the answer to that yet. I think their studying is still going on. Yeah, I think that's still an ongoing question
I
here.
would say that the county engineer who does the new county engineer said, any water that sits as long as soak in, and apparently it's for clay soils. So it actually, probably, that gets a lot of, that's what he assumed, but that's what the study, one of the things the study.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think we're planning to adapt kind of our ability to kind of work with different plans according to what that study tells us about, what's really necessary for the aquifer and helping people on the island. I also just wanted to flag Hannah's repeating questions so that the person who she's talking to at the microphone can hear them, not just that it was confusing, but just if people notice that that's happening now.
Yeah.
Is there a consideration to build a spur for the trail from the home site? So, people park there at the home site and have to walk the non-shoulder to the trailhead. Is there a consideration for that?
Yeah, so question was, is there a consideration for a spur trail off of the additional parking at that old Hope site to meet up with the Guemes Mountain Trail? Yes, I think that that's definitely something that if we didn't develop it, it would happen. And so I think that that's something that we would proactively, if there was a parking lot area up there, there would be more interpretive signage and such, and then to have kind of that spur meet up with the main trail there. There's already kind of a natural deer trail / person trail that does that. So, I'm not gonna throw names out. So yeah, that would happen for sure. Any other questions from folks? And if you can't think of anything now, but then you think of something later, please contact me. I'm really happy to talk with folks out here. And so we're really excited to be out here more.
One thing you've emphasized in the past is the grand plan to connect the properties, make a sort of this corridor.
Right.
Are there any other possibilities for applications for easements along the way to get going on that?
Yeah. So the future dogwoods is definitely one of them. And if any other folks out here are interested in helping with that protection, conservation easements, San Juan Preservation Trust, us, ownership, these are all ways that we can network that landscape together.
Did you go back to that first map that shows
Oh yeah.
the Venus wildlife corridor? It's doing pretty well. You show the dogwoods as well.
Yeah, so the network landscape coming across here is the protected landscape is coming. So coming across here, and then dogwoods is about here. Yeah, so these two large parcels here, and to the north as well. Okay.
What's cool is that the San Juan Preservation Trust Peach Preserve leg that goes up on the north side of South Shore Road Drive connects with Dogwoods.
Yeah.
And the forests are connected by the San Juan Preservation Trust.
Wow.
So that landscape is really coming together here, which is great.
What was that? That trail,
The Guemes Ferry Trail or Schoolhouse Trail will connect into that. Yeah.
What's that little orange thing just coming off Guemes Island Road? Is that just an access easement or something?
That is part of San Juan Preservation Trust easement. I don't know if Ben, so you're talking about right here.
That's a private road. And we officially an access.
Okay, so it sounds like it could be an access easement, private road. And again, so San Juan Preservation Trust preserves and easements. Ben might be able to speak to this more on whether or not public access on those things. Future Preserve has public access, but I'm not positive about some of your other properties there.
Yeah, as far as I know, the only public access that we manage is.
Yeah, it's a great spot. Great. Is there another hand? Okay. If anyone thinks of anything else, please feel free to contact me. Always excited to chat. So no, our conservation easements, we work with the landowners and it's not required to have public access. Yeah, it's an easement out there. Yeah.
So the Kelly's Point area.
Yeah.
That's land area on top of it. Are there trails in that area? Is that accessible?
So the question was asking about the Kelly's Point conservation area and whether or not there was publicly accessible trails along the bluff. There's not. And so the bluff is an actively eroding bluff. It also abuts private landowners too. But the beach is an awesome spot to go and walk for public access.
Plan to make any access up there, or is it?
It's a good question.
We did talk about that a bit when we first acquired the property and kind of talked to some experts on that sort of coastal bluff morphology and what's going to happen. And our lawyer who said, do not put a trail on top of that bluff.
Yeah. So yeah, the bluff is actively eroding and definitely.
And that's actually maybe a good point.
Sorry?
Just to flag, because I can't remember if we talked about this. I think we did at a public meeting previously, but maybe just to flag for folks that at Kelly's Point, even if you're walking on the beach, it's always good to be aware of the bluff next to you and to watch for signs of things coming down. So,
Yeah. So being aware of all those environmental and natural hazards as you're accessing these properties. Yeah. So I think that concludes. Oh yeah.
Oh, I'll just ask you. I was gonna ask about Friends of the Shoreline. Do you partner with them at all? I mean, they just came out and did a really nice program for some of us on South Shore on the bluff and talked about, vegetation on our healthy vegetation and how to be a steward of your shoreline. And I thought it was just fabulous. And I just thought that's something that you guys.
So the question was whether or not we partner with Friends of the Shoreline. Okay.
I can say we don't, so we have kind of like things that we do that are on the same tracks but don't tend to overlap all the time. But like we call them and ask them questions sometimes, or have hosted events on our lands in different areas sometimes.
It's all by grants, and when I moved into my house, they sent me a little book all about, how you can be a friend of the shoreline.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I didn't know that they did that, actually. That's really cool.
They sent experts out and they came and they looked at our shoreline and gave us recommendations for us.
That's really neat. I think that's something that we should look into and see if we can partner with them. That's a really great. Yeah, it's good.
On that topic, the Guemes Planning Advisory Committee also has an agreement with San Juan Preservation Trust, which native plantings in the beach preserve. And we have money set aside for shoreline restoration.
Oh, cool.
Ross Glasser Fund, about $8,000 in that. So if you're interested in restoring your shoreline or soft armor, if you will, let us know.
That's
awesome. Yeah, I think I saw a Facebook post with photos from the Beach Preserve Work Party that looked pretty great. Yeah. I think, maybe just Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you.